Joe Biden woke up to a crisp, sunny morning in Washington, D.C., the kind of day that made you feel like anything was possible. Today was special. He had been invited to speak at the grand opening of a new community center in a modest neighborhood just outside the city. It wasn't just any community center. This one had been funded largely by small donations from residents, a testament to the resilience and unity of the people. For Biden, it represented everything he'd always believed in: the power of community and the importance of giving back. By 9 a.m, Joe was suited up, coffee in hand, and heading to the motorcade. His team briefed him on the event's schedule as the cars sped through the city streets. The center was already buzzing with activity. Local families had gathered, children were running around, and volunteers were setting up food stalls and entertainment areas. For many, this was the most exciting thing to happen in their neighborhood in years. When Biden arrived, he was greeted by a chorus of cheers. The crowd had been waiting eagerly, many holding signs that read, "Thank you, Joe, and hope for our future." He took his time walking through the crowd, shaking hands, posing for selfies, and chatting with people. His genuine warmth was unmistakable. He listened intently to every story, every concern. The event began with speeches from local leaders. Biden's turn came, and he stepped up to the microphone with his trademark smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "this center isn't just a building. It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we come together as one community. You built this, and I couldn't be prouder to stand here with you today." The crowd erupted in applause. As the morning turned into afternoon, Biden toured the facilities. The center had a library, a gym, classrooms for after-school programs, and even a small theater. But what stood out most was the soup kitchen, a place where volunteers served hot meals to anyone in need. Biden spent a considerable amount of time there, chatting with the volunteers and even serving a few bowls of soup himself. He learned about the stories of resilience from the volunteers, who shared how the center had already begun changing lives in the short time it had been operational. Between these interactions, Biden paused to observe the children playing in the courtyard. Their laughter filled the air, a stark contrast to the struggles many of their families faced daily. A young girl approached him, holding a small handmade card. "This is for you," she said shyly. Inside was a drawing of the community center with the words, "Thank you for helping us." Biden knelt to her level, his eyes misty. "Thank you for this. You're the reason we're all here today." But then, as the day seemed to be going perfectly, a commotion broke out. A group of protesters had arrived, holding signs and chanting slogans. They were angry about government policies unrelated to the center, but had chosen this event to voice their frustrations. The mood shifted. Biden's team quickly moved to address the situation, urging him to stay inside the building. Joe, however, had other plans. He stepped outside to meet the protesters, his face calm but serious. "I hear you," he said, raising his hands to quiet the crowd. "I know you're frustrated. Let's talk about it." For a moment, the tension seemed to ease. But then, a protester shouted something inflammatory, accusing Biden of being out of touch with ordinary Americans. The remark struck a nerve. Biden's demeanor changed. His smile faded, and his voice took on a sharp edge. "You think I don't understand struggle?" he said, stepping closer. "I've buried a wife and a daughter. I've lost a son. Don't tell me I don't know what it's like to hurt." The crowd fell silent, shocked by the raw emotion in his voice. "But you know what?" he continued. "I got back up. And so can this country. So can you." Without waiting for a response, Biden turned and walked back into the building. Inside, his team looked at him anxiously. "I'm fine," he said, waving them off. But the incident had clearly rattled him. He decided to leave earlier than planned, thanking the organizers and promising to return soon. As the motorcade pulled away, Biden stared out the window, lost in thought. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had let his emotions get the best of him, even though his words had come from the heart. Later that evening, back at the White House, Biden sat alone in his private study. The day's events replayed in his mind. He regretted losing his temper, but also felt that his words needed to be said. He decided to make amends. Picking up the phone, he called the center's director and asked for the names of some of the protesters. "I want to meet them," he said. "Not in front of cameras. Just me and them." Over the next few days, Biden reflected deeply on how he could better connect with people who felt left behind or ignored. He reached out to his advisors and asked for more opportunities to engage directly with citizens outside of official events. "Let's set up town halls, listening sessions, whatever it takes," he said. "I need to hear their stories." A week later, Biden returned to the community center, this time unannounced and without the media. He sat down with the protesters in a small room, listening to their concerns and sharing his own struggles. The conversation was intense but productive. By the end, there was a sense of mutual respect. One protester, a single mother named Angela, shared how difficult it had been to make ends meet, even with a full-time job. Biden listened intently and promised to follow up on policies that could help people like her. His sincerity resonated, and Angela later remarked to friends, "He really listened. I didn't expect that." Before leaving, Biden addressed a smaller crowd that had gathered outside. "I'm not perfect," he said. "I make mistakes. But I promise you this, I'll always show up, I'll always listen. And together, we'll keep moving forward." The crowd cheered, not because he was flawless, but because he was human. Over the following days, Biden's actions matched his words. He convened meetings with lawmakers to discuss new initiatives aimed at addressing the concerns he had heard directly from citizens. Programs focused on affordable housing, job creation, and community investment began to take shape. The media caught wind of these efforts, turning the story of the community center into a symbol of Biden's commitment to bridging divides and addressing grassroots issues. The community center itself became a hub of activity. Inspired by Biden's visit, more volunteers signed up and donations poured in. The soup kitchen expanded its hours, the after-school programs grew, and the library started hosting literacy workshops for adults. The protesters who had once been skeptical now found themselves participating in the very initiatives they had criticized, working alongside neighbors to create a better environment for everyone. For Biden, the experience was transformative. It reminded him why he had entered public service in the first place, to make a tangible difference in people's lives. He began incorporating stories from the community center into his speeches, using them as examples of what could be achieved when people came together with a shared purpose. Months later, Angela, the single mother who had spoken with Biden, was invited to the White House. She represented countless others who had benefited from the new policies and programs. Standing beside Biden during a press conference, she spoke about how her life had changed. "I used to feel invisible," she said. "But now I feel seen, I feel heard. And I have hope for the future." As the applause filled the room, Biden looked on with a sense of fulfillment. The journey from that tense day at the community center to this moment had been challenging, but it had also been deeply rewarding. It was a testament to the power of listening, the importance of humility, and the belief that even the most difficult conversations could lead to meaningful change. And so, the story of Joe Biden and the community center became more than just a political anecdote. It became a symbol of resilience, empathy, and the enduring belief in a brighter future for all. Meanwhile, the ripple effects of the event continued to grow. Local schools began collaborating with the Center for After-School Enrichment Programs, introducing art, music, and coding classes. Families who had never engaged in community efforts began volunteering, inspired by Biden's visit. The protesters, who had initially disrupted the opening, became some of the center's most vocal advocates, sharing their transformation with others in the neighborhood. As the center continued to thrive, local businesses took notice. They began offering scholarships for students who wanted to pursue higher education, and several companies set up internship programs for teenagers. What had once been a forgotten neighborhood was now a beacon of hope and opportunity, and it all started with the community's determination to build something better. Biden's involvement didn't stop there. He worked alongside local leaders to secure more federal funding for community-based initiatives. His visits became more frequent, and his deep connection to the neighborhood strengthened. Biden knew that the progress they had made wasn't just about financial investment, it was about creating a culture of support, understanding, and collective responsibility. One afternoon, as Biden stood in the courtyard of the community center, he watched the children playing basketball. He had returned for another impromptu visit, this time to meet with a group of high school students interested in starting a youth leadership program. Their enthusiasm was infectious, and Biden couldn't help but feel a surge of optimism. "One day, you'll be the ones leading this country," he said, addressing the students. "Don't ever forget that what you do here today can shape the future." Biden's words echoed in the courtyard, leaving an impression on the students. They had always heard about leadership in school textbooks, but hearing it from the president himself made them realize that leadership wasn't just a title, it was a responsibility to serve others. The students asked questions about how they could contribute to their communities, and Biden was more than willing to offer advice, emphasizing that change often started at the local level. "You don't have to wait for permission to make a difference," he said. "You just need the will to act." As the weeks passed, the impact of the community center began to ripple outward. More families who had been hesitant to engage in civic life began to attend town hall meetings and participate in volunteer work. They realized that they had a voice that mattered. The efforts of local activists, many of whom had been pushing for change long before Biden's visit, were amplified as more and more people came together. It became clear that this wasn't just a one-time event. It was the beginning of a movement for greater civic engagement and empowerment. At a town hall meeting, Biden sat down with local leaders to discuss the challenges the community still faced. While there had been progress, the neighborhood was still struggling with high unemployment rates and lack of affordable housing. Biden acknowledged that the work wasn't done and that the fight for equitable opportunities would take time. He promised to continue advocating for policies that would help lift up communities like this one. "We will not rest until every person has a chance to succeed," Biden assured the crowd. Meanwhile, the neighborhood saw tangible changes. Local businesses, inspired by the president's visit and the community's renewed sense of hope, began to invest in the area. New shops opened, bringing with them jobs and a sense of pride to the residents. The center's job training programs, which had once seemed like a distant dream, were now fully operational, with individuals from the neighborhood learning new skills and securing employment. The center had transformed from a symbol of struggle to a beacon of opportunity. In the coming months, Biden returned to the community center several more times. Each visit felt more personal than the last, as he began to forge genuine friendships with residents who had once been strangers. The president made it a point to check in with people he had met previously, asking how their lives had changed and offering words of encouragement. These small moments of connection were what meant the most to him. It wasn't about grand speeches or big announcements. It was about showing up and making people feel heard. One of the most moving moments for Biden came when he was invited to attend a graduation ceremony at the center. The first cohort of students who had gone through the job training program was graduating, and their stories of triumph filled him with pride. He spoke to the graduates, telling them that they had accomplished something extraordinary. "You're not just graduates of a program," he said. "You're the proof that when we invest in each other, we create a better future for everyone." The students stood tall, many with tears in their eyes, knowing that their hard work had paid off. As the neighborhood continued to thrive, Biden's team worked to secure funding for similar community-based projects across the country. The success of the community center had proven that when people came together and worked toward a common goal, they could overcome even the most significant obstacles. Biden's administration focused on building partnerships between federal, state, and local governments to create opportunities for more communities to flourish in the same way. It wasn't just about top-down policies, it was about fostering grassroots movements that could drive lasting change. Throughout all of this, Biden remained grounded in his belief that empathy was the key to understanding and addressing the needs of others. He often reflected on his own experiences, his childhood, his time as a senator, the losses he had endured. These moments of personal reflection helped him remain humble, reminding him why he had chosen public service in the first place. "It's not about me," he would say. "It's about making sure that every American has a fair shot at the American dream." As the year drew to a close, Biden's team prepared for the upcoming election. His record of engagement with everyday Americans, particularly in communities like the one near the center, became a central focus of his campaign. The message was clear. Biden wasn't just a politician who spoke about change. He was a leader who worked alongside people to make that change happen. It had been a reminder that while Washington might set the tone, it was in places like this small, everyday communities that true change began. Biden was ready for whatever came next, knowing that as long as people stood together, there was no challenge too great to overcome.